got an apple candle. Slightly obsessed. Not that I can get into it. Hello people, I'm Ginnymetheral and I am a 4th generation witch. I've got a new series and this is the first video in it. This new series of mine is looking at witchcraft during the month of October. Now I know I've already done a video on October witchcraft, and if you haven't seen it, I'll put it up here. Go and watch it, it's very good. However, I wanted to concentrate on the traditional tools that a witch might use in her craft. Things like the wand, the broomstick, the cauldron. I want to go through a little bit into the history of them and show you what a traditional witch might have used them for and the rituals and spells that they would have used. However, this video, I'm not going to look at a tool. I am going to look at something that is so associated with the month of October that no one can get away from it, well, especially not in this country. I don't know where you are in your neck of the woods, but we at the moment are currently obsessed with apples. This one is particularly delicious. It's really sweet and crunchy. Oh, I love apple. My daughter says that she thinks we're a family of horses because we're so obsessed with apples. Apples are incredibly pagan. They were worshipped by the Druids, they were worshipped by the Celts, they were worshipped by pretty much everyone, including the general populace. They were a staple crop of our times because they were full of carbohydrates, they were sweet and they lasted through the winter. You could store them. You might be able to hear my duck squawking in the background. Darling Waddles the duck has lost her best friend and she is currently spending her time walking around the garden crying for Puddles, who sadly got foxed a couple of days ago. And so I feel very sorry for her. We shall have to get her some more friends, but it's not the time for ducklings at the moment, so apologies for the sad duck in the background. The Druids loved apple trees because they thought that they were gateways to the other realms. The primary wand for a Druid was an apple tree wood wand. One of the other reasons that Druids worshipped the apple trees, because mistletoe is most commonly found on apple trees, and of course mistletoe is one of the 7 sacred herbs of the Druids. It's not just the Druids who appreciated the wondrousness of the apple tree. Throughout history, apples have been revered by literally everyone. Let's look at ancient Greeks, one of the oldest civilizations. They had Aphrodite and the golden apple. These golden apples which were planted in the garden of Hesperides and caused so much discord and the war on Troy. Celtic mythology very much venerates the apple and has it as food that is offered to the dead. Now, of course, when are the dead needing offerings of food? As we all know, it's at Halloween or Samhain, depending on how you celebrate this festival. Apples were considered the food of the dead, and they were offered to the dead by the Celts at Halloween to prevent them coming into the houses and causing havoc. A lot of the ancient Celtic goddesses, such as Brede or Bridget, having apples as their totems. Now, when the Christians came along, they highly Christianized Brede or Bridget into their very, very popular saint, Saint Bridget, and had her causing miracles to happen by growing apples on elder trees out of season. This is simply because Celtic mythology has apples as symbols of immortality, hence why they're offered to the dead. This immortality and apple go hand in hand, which is why when the great King Arthur died and was taken over to the Isle of Avalon, Avalon being Afal, Welsh for apple, he was laid to rest under the apple trees of Avalon, which were always had apples on them, by the way, and put to sleep by the great wizard Merlin so that he can reclaim the throne of England again one day. Other Christian traditions about the apple is, of course, the apple is known as the forbidden fruit from the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve ate the apple and Adam got a piece stuck in his throat, hence why the male-born of our species have an Adam's apple. From this point, apples were Christianized to represent knowledge. So the Virgin Mary is often depicted by a bowl of apples because it's knowledge and goodness. So perhaps an apple for your teacher. just as saying your knowledge and goodness are great. In fact, the apple tree and love are synonymous. If you are a pagan and decide to have a hand fasting, it's very popular to have them at Beltane. And Beltane, of course, the apple blossom is out. A hand fasting ceremony at Beltane underneath an apple tree in full blossom brings your love and immortality vibe to it. And apple blossoms and violets together were known as a very potent love potion. Now, this is a non-directional spell, so don't be surprised if you do this spell and give it to the object of your affections, they go off and fall in love with somebody else. All it does is open their eyes to love. You've been warned. Apple trees, of course, were incredibly important economically, to the fact that the fines for stealing apples or cutting apples down show this. The fine for stealing one apple was 2 ounces of silver, which is pretty much, all the silver in the world, as far as I can see, especially if you're a peasant. No one could really pay that, certainly not a child who might be the one who's scrumping the apple. The fine for cutting down an apple tree is even worse. It's 10.5 cattle. That's how heavy the fines were. Whether they were carried out or not, I don't know. But that's because apples are huge important in our economic livelihood over the winter months. As I have mentioned, King Arthur lies at rest on the Isle of Avalon, which we don't know where it is. However, there is a rumour that the Isle of Avalon could be known as Bardsey Island. Bardsey Island is an island off the coast of Wales, and one day an ornithologist was studying some birds there, and he noticed an apple tree blooming with apples. And the apples themselves were completely disease-free, which is unusual. Apples are very prone to diseases. So he took this apple to be tested by the apple archive people. Yes, we do have that here. And they said it's a completely unknown variety. On questioning the locals, they went, "Oh yeah, it's Merlin's apples, those be Merlin's apples." And they are possibly the great grandchildren of the great wizard Merlin's apple trees. You can actually buy them. They're called Bardsey Island apples. There's a few of them that are for sale each year. So if you potentially want Merlin's apple trees themselves, have a look. Apples are also known for their medicinal properties. For women, apples are brilliant because they're full of that vitamin B6, which women lose through their monthly cycles. And so an apple a day really does keep the doctor away. They made a lovely eye tonic, they made a great skin tonic, they were used for diarrhea, they were used for constipation, they were used to help your lungs and purify. There's a lot going on with the apple. What is known in today's date that you can make the most wonderful skin tonic. You cut your apple in half and you rub both halves over your face and your neck, and you leave the juice from this freshly cut apple on your face for 5 minutes. Wash it up and it acts as a natural skin tonic and toner. Likewise, I'm going to try this with you now. A very traditional spell for getting rid of warts is to use an apple. I have the world's smallest wart. It's just under my finger there. I don't think any of you can see it though, because it's so small. However, it's annoying. I don't want to be that old warty witch as I get older and older and older, so let's get rid of it together. What I'm going to do is cut an apple in half. And I'm going to take this apple and I'm going to rub it on the wart. I'm going to take the apple and I'm going to bury it. As the apple rots, hopefully, so will the wart. So could you remind me at Christmas and we'll have a look and see if it's worked. And finally, traditions at Halloween with apples. Apples are for love, and Halloween was very much concerned with divination, and apples were used within this. So here's a couple of things you can try at home. I want you to take your apple and I want you to peel it and keep the peel as long as possible. And then you stand up and you throw the peel over your left shoulder and you let it settle on the ground. It should show you the first initial of the person who will be your future life partner. The fae or fairies also love an apple, and at Halloween it is really important to leave an offering of apples to the fairies so they don't cross through your threshold and bring havoc into your world and your home. Likewise, tradition states that you should never pick the last apple from an apple tree. You must always leave it there for the fair folk so that they don't get cross that you have stolen their crop. And you must remember that old apple bobbing at Halloween that we all played as youngsters. This was a divination game. It was simply the first person who managed to take an actual bite out of the apple would be the first person married in the coming year. The Cornish, who of course are of Celtic stock, have Allantide apples. Allantide is their name for Halloween, essentially, and the start of the new year. You would get the biggest and rosiest apple that you could find and polish it and display it in your window. And then you would give your Allantide apple to your loved one and friends for good luck, foresight and fortune in the coming year. Now those friends, if they were single, might take their Allantide apple and put it underneath their pillow. And in the morning, you would have prophetic dreams over who you were going to marry. And if you liked those persons that you were going to marry, then you ate the apple to ensure that they really came true. And lastly, I want to give you a traditional Gypsy spell to mend a cracked marriage. I've talked about this a couple of years ago, so I think it's worth repeating here. You want to pick your apple from the tree because the life force of a freshly picked apple is much greater than one that has been picked previously. Take that apple and cut it in half. Between the two halves of the apple, I want you to place a piece of folded paper on each side of which you have written the name of the couple. 2 skewers and skewer the apple back together with the piece of paper. Now it's at this point that I would add things like sugar and raisins and cinnamon maybe, and put it in the oven and bake it, because what you want to do is when the apple has mushed up and melded back together, you want to get the couple in question to eat it, and this will help heal a cracked relationship. So at my upcoming Halloween party, I for one am going to be doing apple bobbing. I'm going to have some toffee apples on sticks, obviously, because they're delicious. And I'm going to leave offerings of apples on my doorstep for the dead and for the fae. What are you going to do? I would love to know. Why don't you leave me a comment down below? Coven meeting is still coming up. It's happening around the 10th of October. I haven't put it up yet, but it will be. Go to patreon.com/Ginnymetheral for more details. Otherwise, please don't forget to like and subscribe because it really helps my channel and ensures that I can continue making the rest of this series of Halloween videos for you. And that is when I will see you next.